of the Nordic Peace Alliance working group on Helsinki+50. I'm representing in the Nordic Peace Alliance Artists for Peace, but I'm especially a long-time member of Friends of the Earth Sweden and being active as such, also trying to link the environmental movement and the peace movement. I hope that this first session will be helpful in giving impetus to a process, making it possible to understand that the Helsinki principles is of global concern. We know that it was able to inspire a huge human rights and peace movement in the 1980s of global importance also today. We also see that there are some very specific problems in this regard in terms of that what was once indivisible human rights has now been turned very much into only civil rights, and suddenly only civil rights also in what is called authoritarian countries. We hope to change this by saying that we have to reunite the movements with a common message. And to this end, we have invited speakers. We have some problems in terms of resources. As we see all over the world, the peace movement is under very strong pressure. But we saw it anyway necessary to try to get prominent speakers knowledgeable in this field and address this issue not only as a European issue. This webinar will be recorded, and we do hope that it can be used in the process, which is starting today, online process. There will be possibles to submit and give comments to the proposed declaration until the 7th of July. And then it will be summarized and sent out for making signatures and presented to the OSCE embassies in Helsinki, as well as an official conference. Then, of course, this will be also a part of processes which we hope can continue. We know that there's an important process on common security. We hope that this will also be important for reuniting peace and environmental and human rights movements. So now I see also Marco. Marco, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry to be late.
No, but now everyone is here, which is wonderful. And we can start the discussion. We have to see to that Arthur is possible to, after 45 minutes, go to a meeting concerning the extreme war going on against Iran and the Middle East situation. We'll see what happens when we start, and then we can maybe reschedule according to the needs here. The proposal was to have an introduction from Marco Kangaspuru, the head of the Alexandri Institute, Euro-Asian Institute at the Helsinki University, which we think was very useful at this first session, where we tried to have a little bit perspective towards the whole former Soviet zone. So it's welcome that also Yuri Sheloshenko is with us, and also, of course, all the rest from Asia. As has been stated by Palle Benson, who is from also the Nordic Peace Alliance, he will help us in the chat, and we will ask everyone who has specific comments for the declaration to put it in writing in the chat, which will be saved. It's very much helpful for us that way. We have, I think, we have an artificial intelligence companion, but you can never trust the AI. It can be useful, but it's not trustable in terms of more specific content. So now I see Heidi Meinzold from WILP as well attending, and many others. So this is nice. You can all those who are coming, you can write your name in the chat. So ease up so people know who are present at the meeting as well. And the order was to first give the word to Marco Kangaspuro. Welcome, Marco.
Yes, thank you. I thought that I will raise up the three central issues under the discussion concerning if we are speaking about the comprehensive security system and especially in Eurasia. I feel that according to my understanding, of course, the biggest current issue and problem is the breakdown of the whole comprehensive and old European security architecture. And it has its consequences also in the whole Eurasian area. I don't start from the end of the Cold War period, but it has, and also the war in Ukraine has its roots over there. But in any case, it's the own issue to discuss, but we don't have time for that. I see that the OSCE would be the platform, and it is needed platform if we want to create some kind of the mandatory dialogue between Europe, Western Europe, and Russia, between find out the outcome of the war in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine, and to start step by step to develop some kind of idea of the new European security architecture, including the nearby areas. That means that also including wider Eurasian area, Central Asia and Asia. The biggest problem at the moment in Europe, and if we are speaking to Eurasia, I'm a little bit Eurocentric, I agree, but the biggest problem is the Putin's war in Ukraine. It has its own background, but it of course doesn't. The background doesn't justify Russia's aggression over there, and I see that at the moment the situation is so difficult, and there is not enough much will in any party that it is possible to be resolved in short term. I'm afraid that the war will continue at least until the end of this year, maybe the beginning of the next year or so forth. It's not our will, and it's of course, and it's the task of the civil society, peace movements, and non-governmental organization try to pressure and create pressure to governments and decision makers to do something and to find out political solutions. But looks like that there are so many and many different big power clashing interests concerning the Ukraine and that war that it's really difficult task, but that is the one precondition to solve all the other problems, environmental problem, climate change, human rights, social rights, and all that kind, democracy, all that kind of questions. It's self-evident that as long as the war is continuing, the Russian society is becoming more and more authoritarian, approaching to the point of dictatorship. Not yet, but in my understanding, but very close to it. And that means that also civil society organizations and they have a less and less space to act and to try to influence to anything. Same unfortunately hold true if we are speaking quite many other states in Eurasia, including Ukraine. This war mood has had consequences also in the West and I would say to the freedom of speech in academia, in the media, and in public, and that's very unfortunately typical. These are typical consequences, but these have been happened also in our own societies, and for that reason, I want to emphasize the question of war. Also, when we are speaking about OSCE. So I would say that the old agenda concentrating mainly elections, fair elections, and that kind of issues, it's little bit, they are extremely important, but they are not at the moment first on the agenda if we want to put them to some hierarchical position. That's a rough statement, but I see that we have to create some kind of preconditions to better development, and that is the war and stopping the war. It has a lot of to do the OSCE principles, which have been, I mean, declared that no one cannot improve own safety, military safety, security on the expense of the other, and that has been the whole problem. Big problem. This agreement of these issues have been the big problem of the European security architecture. I see that, and it has something to pretty much to do with Russia's policy and collapse of the Soviet Union and reorganizing that area and creating new alliances, new relations, and new relations to the West and then to Russia and between these countries, but also the NATO expansion and the decision to, I mean, rely on the European security on the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That has been a big issue because and why it has been very, to put it very simple, it has been because Russia has been out of the whole discussions in real terms. Then we have, of course, that big climate change issue. It's a big human rights issue as well. Security question and equality question. We have taken backward steps in solving these problems. And then the third issue what I want to raise up is that one central issue is that how to proceed towards creating more just not only just order and relations between states, but just societies in the situation where we have a wars and we have a climate change and big environmental problems and that's basic thing to create somehow just society in order to I mean promote also human all kind of human rights and democracy. And that is not, I see that we have taken backward steps, many backward steps also into Eurasian area on that respect. So that's I don't have very good, solutions, but I have wanted to raise up these issues which I feel that we should address. Thank you.
So, first peace, otherwise it will be more or less impossible to solve the other issues, yeah? Now I invite Eng Saikan to get a perspective from Mongolia. Please, take the floor.
Please unmute.
The microphone, please.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to thank you for organizing this an important event, which is not only to commemorate the Helsinki +50 event, which in itself is a very important anniversary, but also I think, as it has been pointed out, to exchange views on its effects on the Cold War, to think how to revive and strengthen the Helsinki spirit, as well as move forward and broaden its impact beyond the European continent. The timeline provided to us shows that it is being organized, and not only until August 1st, but even well beyond it. I think that's very good. The importance of the Helsinki Agreement were one of the important moments of multilateral diplomacy since the end of World War II and at the height of Cold War. It showed that multilateral diplomacy can work. The experience shows that it can work. The testament to it is the CSCE and later OSCE that established agreed norms of conduct in 3 major areas of state activities. At the same time, it showed that these agreements cannot be realized automatically, but need mutual effort and cooperation, since the devil is always in the details. We all agree on the principles, but when it comes to practical activity, there's always some difficulty in that sense. So, like other countries, in 1975, Mongolia hailed the Helsinki Summit and its outcome as a success not only for Europe, but also as an example and inspiration for other regions, like the Asia Pacific. At that time, Mongolia was under double Cold War, East-West on the side of East, and Sino-Soviet on the side of the Soviets. Mindful of the spirit of Bandung Conference of 1955 and of the Helsinki Agreement, in 1986, our government proposed to the Asian African Legal Consultative Committee to consider developing a Helsinki-type instrument on friendly and good neighborly relations between the states of Asia and the Pacific, and even submitted to the committee's consideration a memorandum and draft elements of the legal instrument. In the memorandum, it had pointed out that though general principles may play an important role as guiding principles of relations among states, their too general nature at times allow different and even quite opposite interpretations, with all the ensuing consequences. It explained that consideration and agreement on the content of the principles could lead to their uniform interpretation and stricter observance. It had also pointed out that in 1955, only 17 states participated in the Bandung Conference, but by 1986, more than 40 countries of Asia were prepared to work on these issues. They were mature states of Asia and Pacific. However, soon thereafter, the committee faced financial problems and had to review its agenda, and the issue was not pursued further in Mongolia. Later, Mongolia raised the Helsinki experience on a number of times. Thus, for example, in 2009, together with the George Marshall Center, which is East European Center for Security Studies, has organized in Mongolia a conference with the title Mongolia as New Helsinki. It considered such issues as European example of neutrality, the role of neutral and non-aligned countries in Europe, challenges for security and confidence building measures, and other issues. Dr. Markku Reima of Finland and Professor Bert Emstrom of Sweden and many other experts participated in our conference. We also invited military attachés from European countries to participate, and we heard their views and opinions. Since most of OSCE partners were medium-sized and small states, in 2004, Mongolia became Asian partner for cooperation, so as to work closely with these states. In 2012, it became 57th participating state of OSCE. The talks with the US and Russian ambassadors and their military representatives were not very easy. Yet, in the end, they all agreed and accepted Mongolia. Thus, we believe Mongolia can play a bridging role in the future. Turning to the draft declaration. The draft declaration is an impressive document based, I think, on the spirit of common security. It duly reflects not only the successes, but also the challenges facing not only the European continent, but globally today. Thus, it underlines the importance of strengthening of international law, which is very important now. That is important since it is being interpreted arbitrarily, mindful of interests of a state or a group of states. The draft also calls for international cooperation that is free from double standards and bias. That is also very important. Rejection of misuse of human rights language to justify interference for strategic and economic advantages is right to the point. It should be reflected as such in the draft declaration. There are also other provisions in the draft that are relevant under today's conditions and acquired half-century experience. Of course, it goes without saying that the priorities and conditions of Europe and Indo-Pacific are different. Therefore, there would be differences. However, and I would like to underline, the general approach towards common security, that is, security of one is understood to be inseparable from security of all others, is being underlined, and that confidence-building measures are first steps to be taken, as it was in the case of the Helsinki process. Mongolia's Ulaanbaatar dialogue is meant to promote this idea of CBMs. Blue Banner, as Mongolian NGO, is prepared to work with others in this respect. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this really substance when we start to discuss the Helsinki process as something wider than only Europe. I have a suggestion in terms of the schedule of the speakers, that we let Artur Kashikian speak now to make him feel more at ease. And then Anuradha Shenoy, followed by Keshap Shapko, and finally Francis Dai Hong Lee. So please, Artur, take the floor.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your consideration. We are in a little bit of a situation now because the attack on Iran is happening right next door, and they're asking me to speak publicly a lot on the subject. I'll try to be very brief. I would call my presentation 10 strikes and we're out. 10 strikes against the New World Order that was formed in the 90s after the end of the Cold War. The signs of rapprochement and détente that started in the 70s with the Helsinki process. We're now presiding over the rubble of that entire security architecture. So I entitled my presentation 10 Strikes and We're Out. I'd like to start with a quote from President Kennedy of 1963, right after the Cuban Missile Crisis. What kind of peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana enforced on the world by American weapons of war. Not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I'm talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and to build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace for all time. Beautiful words. Sadly, the lessons of the Cuban Missile Crisis were soon forgotten. The détente of 1970s, the New World Order of the 90s, even prior to that, Gorbachev's new thinking, the idea of a common European house, all these ideas joined the library of abandoned projects and the cemetery of good intentions that Europe in particular went through since, times immemorial, at least 4 or 5 centuries. So now let's turn to the 10 strikes. Strike number 1. One secret for peace in the world, called collective security, was known for centuries to European philosophers, starting with the Peace of Westphalia and the Duke of Sully, his plan for the European Federation, with the Treaty of Utrecht in 1714, Abbé de Saint-Pierre and his plan for a collective security organization in Europe. Famously, the Concert of Europe following the Napoleonic Wars, which was probably the most successful institution. And the League of Nations, which was probably the least successful institution. All of those, and the United Nations, of course, all of those were founded upon the principle of collective security. Sadly, since late 1990s and until this day, we have pretty much completed our journey from collective to partial security. The leaders of the world do not want to understand that security cannot be partial, it cannot be privatized. It's like water or electricity. It's a public utility. It's a public good. And you cannot increase your security at the expense of the others. The tragedy of Ukraine, the tragedy of Georgia, many other post-Soviet republics is largely due to the project of NATO expansion. I know that anyone who tries to oppose NATO expansion is immediately attacked by the enormous propaganda machine in the Western media, but I will repeat this. The expansion of NATO was a catastrophic historical mistake, and it brought us to exactly the same results as I, for one, expected, and many other people, much more important than I am, predicted 30 years ago. So strike number 1, we destroyed the system of collective security and we came to partial security. Strike number 2, from mentality of equilibrium, we transitioned to a mentality of domination and Pax Americana. From the policy of maintaining a balance between the leading powers, first the superpowers and then the great powers, we again adopted the policy of domination, politics of power. We went from the rule of law and international traditions and customs to the rule of force, because to maintain domination, you use force. So it's quite logical that in this new world with a new hegemon, with the Wolfowitz doctrine and the Bush doctrine, the use of force and what we hear today as peace through strength. Incidentally, instead of peace through strength, we get chaos, bloodshed, and devastation through strength. But it should not come as a surprise, because that's what happens when the world leaders adopt this way of thinking, the emphasis on domination by force rather than maintaining an equilibrium. Strike number 3, from multilateralism to unilateral use of force, new interventionism. One of the most important tenets of the League of Nations, but much more importantly, the Concert of Europe, was that conflicts were supposed to be resolved collectively. All powers were consulted. It was a consensus-based mechanism. So intervention had to be collective, or at least sanctioned collectively by the great powers. Sadly, with the strikes in Yugoslavia, the West and NATO decided to circumvent the United Nations. You can argue whether or not it was warranted. I think in the case of Yugoslavia, it was warranted. Certainly the horrors of Srebrenica and Gorazde, the killings of tens of thousands of Muslim men and boys, and the others. There was ethnic violence between all groups, but those were the most horrifying examples. I think it was warranted, but unfortunately it created a precedent of circumventing, bypassing the United Nations, and not for the first time. So again, we went to unilateral use of force and unilateral intervention, which the results of which we're seeing today as we speak. Today, there is now a new military campaign in a country that's bordering Armenia with the intention of changing the regime. Strike number 4. From arms control to a new arms race, we witnessed a complete dismantlement of the entire arms control architecture since, if I'm not mistaken, 1950s or early 1960s, with the first comprehensive test ban treaty, finishing with START, the new START treaty, whatever the number, the numeral is. The recent attack on the strategic airports in Russia would have been unthinkable during the Cold War. We would all be in bunkers right now. This would have been completely unthinkable. The only remaining treaty, START treaty, is probably not going to be prolonged for the reasons I just mentioned. So we can congratulate ourselves that the entire architecture of arms control has been blown to smithereens. Strike number 5, from the ideology of integration, we came to a new polarization. Integration in the West and counter-integration in the East. The idea of a common European house was replaced with the West wing and the East wing. And the former Soviet republics were forced, in some ways literally forced in some instances, to choose between the West and the East, which led to the tragedy I mentioned. Strike number 6, from common values, much due to the Helsinki process, to a new ideological division. We thought that we were building a world in the late 80s and 90s where we had one ideology, where we could agree that we differ on certain issues, but we could, we declared the primacy of human rights, the primacy of human values, all human values that transcend differences between capitalism and communism. Now we have this ideological division again between the self-proclaimed beacon of democracy and human rights and international law that is in the process of bombing Iran as we speak and killing thousands and thousands of Palestinian children and mothers every day in the name of democracy and human rights and international law. Strike number 7, economic integration that was seen as means of maintaining peace was turned into a tool for war, into an instrument for war. The whole idea of the European integration process after World War II was to prevent new wars by integrating Western Europe, primarily France and Germany, to such an extent that a new war between them would be unthinkable. Well, in the late 1990s and in the last 25 years, this principle was turned on its head, and economic integration was used as a tool for a new division rather than unification of Europe. The countries, again, as I mentioned, in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet republics were forced to choose between integrating with Europe or integrating with Russia, which led to this disaster. And economic integration in the European Union were used as an avant-garde for NATO expansion and for military strategic expansion. Strike number 8, groundless triumphalism and isolation of the defeated. The winner takes it all policy, cornering a great power. This is one lesson that the architects of the Concert of Europe in 1815 learned very well. France was not excluded from the peace settlement. It was not humiliated, and the territorial losses were very, very reasonable and very acceptable. It's pretty much restored to the territory it had prior to the conquests of Louis XIV and some of it during the French Revolution. But in the case of Russia, Russia was declared to be the loser. The West was declared to be the winner, even though there was no military victory. One could argue that there was an economic victory of the West, perhaps an ideological victory of the West, but there was no military victory or conquest, and it was a very needless principle to declare that the West has won the war and Russia has lost the war, and therefore Russia has to submit to anything that the West decides. In the end, predictably, it led to a feeling of anger, feeling of deception, and feeling of revenge. And Russia came back with a revenge, much like Germany after World War I or France after the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. Strike number 9, instead of reconciliation, we moved towards a historical revanchism, and all the wrongdoings of the Soviet regime and the communist regime, understandably, again, very understandably in the case of Eastern European nations, the Baltic republics, Ukrainians, people in the Caucasus, South Asia, all these wrongdoings were rehashed, revamped, and used as an accusation, used as a reproach to modern Russia. This is not to say that they should have been forgotten. Of course, they should not have been. But there must have been a different way of addressing these issues and these traumas, these wounds of the past, so as to not perpetuate this hatred towards Russia and the opposite feeling on the part of the Russians. There must have been a wiser way to do it, but sadly we lost that opportunity and we went back to perpetuating hatred. And strike number 10 was discrediting democracy, discrediting international norms, and discrediting liberal economics. This is not the world of Immanuel Kant and the liberal thinkers of the 17th and 18th century. This is not the world of democratic peace theory. Democratic states have been responsible for now over 4.5 million people have died, civilians have died as a result of the wars in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, in Ukraine. I don't blame squarely the West for the war in Ukraine, but as a corollary of that. And now we have another war unfolding in Iran. So the ideals of democratic peace, international norms, international legitimacy have been pretty much discredited. And sadly, today it would be very difficult to find people who still think that the liberal model, the Western model, Western values is a better model, and that is a key to peace. So this is these are my 10 points. I'm open to questions if you like, and I hope I wasn't sounding too negative, but I like to say it how it is. That's my manner.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. As an environmentalist, I also see it's interesting that you bring up the economic issue here. It's quite clear this expansion, which Sweden has been one of the main proponents together with Poland, has been really putting many countries in the former Soviet space, including Ukraine, in an impossible situation. And when we discuss the whole Helsinki process, it's quite clear that economic cooperation and environmental issues are in the Final Act 1975. And it's also important because it brings common security and human rights issues together in a way that doesn't reduce the whole Helsinki process to only security issues. And of course, that means that the whole thing is very eclectic, but we have to live with that. And that's why it's been so useful to have the different speakers. I think we should move on. If there's not something very specific to ask Arthur about, I think there are 50 things to ask. But the idea is that we have a common discussion after all the introductions. But if there, you can put it in the chat as well. I'm very pleased that there's a lot of discussion going on in the chat as well. You know that these kind of meetings cannot exceed more than 1.5 hours. Then we are, it's very exhausting already, 1.5 hours. So that's why this use of the chat, and this is where the young activists learns us a lot. I mean, they're extremely good in going on the whole thing, so everybody can speak, and there's things in the chat, and there's exchange of questions and knowledge, etc. So I ask Anuradha Shenoy to contribute, and it's always a big pleasure because you are so willing to participate with such much substance that I get happy whenever I see you. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Todd and friends who are working towards this Helsinki+50. Now, 50 years of the Helsinki Act since 1975, that we from outside Europe, and I'm speaking from India, we have watched this act and the OSCE and can say that when this process started, it was like a model, an example of peace, of common security, of putting an end to huge amounts of, tribal wars within Europe, sometimes hundreds of years, let's say, between France and Germany. And then they had the rights. It had rights of people. It served as a lodestar to countless countries across the globe who still used force as opposed to talks, to diplomacy, to negotiation, to compromise, to consensus. We could see all this in this Helsinki Declaration and Act and the OSCE as that model developed. And though it started, it was at the peak of the Cold War, and yet the East-West relations as then defined, and I think put so well by Arthur, were that they appeared to have not just a balance of power, but it was a balance of civility, a balance of norms of agreement, that if a memorandum is signed, it should be respected in international law and not used to fool somebody else and betray. There was a feeling of détente that, warring countries in South Asia envied. That how could we do it? Civil society envied. Now, when the Soviet Union disintegrated, again, this process looked to us from outside as one that could manage well the ensuing insecurities and the economic collapse of a nuclear power. We were not worried about nuclear conflagration, even though I remember reading Time magazine articles that, Russia can break and should break even further. But yet there was a proposed partnership for peace. So even during the 1999 Balkan Wars, as Arthur mentioned, the process of the OSCE kind of held. So why this rift now? Number one, I think I agree with what Arthur said, the 10 strikes, and I think he put it brilliantly. But it's also evident to us that NATO's expansion and the Ukraine issue are at the core, and you cannot neglect it. We outside, or the non-European world, cannot list as to who sabotaged who, but we know that the Minsk I, the Minsk II, we watch all that, the Istanbul process, the current processes, what happens, who goes in and who goes out, and what are the aims of this growing intense reality. I feel they are constructed rivalries based on the neoliberal economic model, which the corporate world has overtaken the interests of people. the fear, insecurity, militarization, and war, which is only increasing interests as opposed to rules of law or norms. So the three thematic issues of the Helsinki Act, that is the military political, that has been replaced, and then the humanitarian, economic, and environmental, the three thematic principles that were there in the Act. And those were, served a great purpose because they contributed to international development, especially in the global South. And it trickles down, these ideas trickle down into the non-hegemonic powers of the global South, many of which had conflicts against each other, which have decreased. But what trickles down now is exactly the opposite. The idea of force, a mismatch between narrative and reality, because it's impossible for us to comprehend what people are saying, the leadership in Europe is saying or America is saying compared to what is happening on the ground. Inability for compromise. For us, this fear of, let's say, the fear of Russia, the fear of Iran seems unreal. We have a fear of, how is Iran the biggest threat? It's Israel who is killing innocent people every day, and they want the right to defend themselves against who? Iran didn't start the war. So really, because now instead of those, the ideas which Europe gave, the ideas of the Renaissance, or of art, of literature, that was the heritage. What is happening is that war is becoming the heritage and legacy of Europe. And it's putting the diversity, ideas, culture, debates, the openness to the sidelines, where dissent is not being tolerated and suppressed in different ways. It's almost like going back 1930s onwards. So why? I believe there is an overdetermination of security, which will make Europe and all of us captives of the military industrial technological complex and its handful of owners. So I, as part of the International Peace Bureau, of the Asia-Europe People's Forum, of the Transnational Institute, of all of which I am active, ask Europe to renew the Helsinki Act, recall and rework what one major sections of the leaders like Olof Palme contributed to the world of ideas, of common security, and combine it with the realities of today that include, I'm giving 5 points quickly, the security of one group cannot be delivered at the cost of insecurity of another. That is a basic common security principle. And human security is essential to maintain this delicate balance. An unbalanced architecture of security will destroy our common home, our common economic development. All of these intersect. Second, security is holistic and intersectional. It includes states, elite interests, people, climate, environment, business, and therefore indivisible, which means everyone has to give a bit to get that common security. Third, the world is multipolar, and the global South is committed to this multipolarity as they need this to survive. This cannot be dialed back. Unipolarity cannot come back only at the expense of wars and suppression. Fourth, modern wars cannot be won and are deleterious to all, even those not in the war. So therefore, I appeal lastly to because our elite seems impervious to this evidence-based historical experience and conclusion, I appeal that it will be people who will have to pressurize our state leaders, like they are doing so now in all the fantastic protests you're having in Europe on the things that are happening in Gaza, Palestine, and it will happen in Iran, which can obliterate the entire world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anuradha. Thank you. Now we walk a little bit to the north of Anu to Nepal. I met Keshab during the Social Forum last year, and there are several important things when we invite Keshab, and that is Nepal was more or less the only country in Asia where the World Social Forum could be held. It still has memories of the great democratic revolution only not many years ago. And Keshab have been very much involved in that struggle, but also in the main social force in the country, the All Nepalese Farmers Association, or who is a member of Via Campesina. And that is maybe the most important force we have to bring into the discussions, because it is equally important as the trade unions. And without the facing a struggle for peace in the realities in the rural areas, we cannot go forward. So please welcome and take the floor, Keshav.
Thank you so much, Thor, for introducing me to this great assembly of people. I'm very happy, and namaste and greetings from Nepal. We call it namaste, yeah, just like this thing. We are from the eastern space, or South Asian, we should say, the south of Himalayas, where the peace is a concern of daily life. We start our morning with peace, enchantments, like peace to the earth, peace to nature, peace to this universe, and at the end, peace to the peace process itself. Shanti reva shanti, sama shanti redi. It goes in Sanskrit. So peace should be the process of life itself, not only humans, but all the surroundings. So at this point, I like to raise the few questions regarding my own perspective. We are living at a time when everything has been moving, backward. With the coming of Trump in USA, he is representing almost the 1825 Monroe Doctrine, that America for Americans. And that was translated in Make America Great Again. Everywhere, he is not talking of peace. He is not talking of anything, but he says, even to Ukraine president, when he was there, we saw on the social media that what benefit US gets if I help you. See the situation. So everything that is moving and that gave a message to the world, including, as Radhaji put it simply, in global south or global north, everywhere people are thinking of their own country, not the common peace, or the just like our former the speaker said, the comprehensive peace, where there is peace. So this is the time that UN system is going to broken down. I think the hard-earned, elation from the human history that has culminated in UN system, and at least bring the different interest group at the same, a platform with equal rights, equal footing, and thinking of peace. So such things are almost vanishing. So naturally, at this time, the Helsinki spirit comes forward. And when we talk of that security, cooperation, and peace, that they are now a crying need of the time. You know, the Helsinki spirit was translated in Nepal, I should say. You know, then King Virendra, who at the same time in 1975 itself, called for the Nepal as a peace zone. You know, because we are lying between the two giant our neighboring countries, China on the north, and you know that India on the south. Big brothers, you know, and so the small Nepal, how to survive it. So our foreign policy is foreign policy of survival, and it was called by then king zone of peace concept. And if every country, the reason behind that was if every country is declared as a peace of zone, then there will be no war. Peace of zone in the sense of having their own survival, having their own livelihood, and having their own security system, both in civil rights and political arena. This was how, at that time, the 70s and 80s, we were moving on. But after 1990, we know the from bipolar to unipolar, and now unipolar to multipolar, a chaos has been returning back. So the people's, you know, if there is no direct war, then also war within. I'm saying like that. You know, we are talking of that Ukraine war or that Gaza Strip, where yesterday there was a global call and we organized one event in Kathmandu. I should not say under my initiation, but I was one of the initiators. Almost 50 plus organizations, we came together and marched through the main street and we delivered a protest letter at US Embassy, and then to keep the peace going on, not to go supporting that genocide and all those things. But these all things have no, you know, any proper impact as it was at the time when such things were not there. So this vanishing train that we are, whether we are going to have total war or something like that, and increasing the existence of humanity is at question. If such things go on like Iran now coming on the scene, and still if it escalates, then can we think of non-existing third world war? People are discussing like that. There is a very, you know, what you call very threat to human existence. So at this time, what should we do? The civil society, the, you know, peace-loving intelligentsia, the university people, and the common people at large. So how to mobilize these forces and at least pressurize the people who are ignoring the, very ultimate survival of people. You know, there are things just like as my friend told, when we were here together, we were also talk of, these peasants and all those things, and this food and food sovereignty matters, this and health, security, and all those things. Just see this COVID-19 phenomena. You have money, but you have no health thing. You have money, but you have no that vaccine, so-called vaccine. You have money, and that the whole chain of this neoliberal market system broken down, and no food. So it was not less painful than the war itself. So such things are such people's necessities like education, health, and this food, and all these matters, they need to be counted on our agenda. So I think we have to move very closely, all the people, all the like-minded people, I should say, coming together, making voices against, this thing which is prevailing us. Many of us are sometimes exploited, and many of us are more often misled. In the name of this peace and security, sometimes the people make us believe that the act of aggression is also the part of peace process. This type of farce, this type of, this blatant, this untruth, and they go on because we have now the social media, the AI, and all those, what you call general opinion making instruments used for the sake of this warmongering people. So at this time, we should have, a more conscious or more, very, we should have very dedicated people working on the ground and at the, people's perspectives or people's, the realization of peace and peace process. So in this aspect, I think the Helsinki spirit has its own say, and we should revive it and reinvigorate it, and not only for the Europe, but for the larger cause of humanity across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So united we will be, and united we will achieve the great ideals of human peace and security in the life, in our own life system. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And this notion concerning making countries to peace zones, or what is also called neutrality or non-alignment, is interestingly discussed in other parts of the world, and now when Sweden and Finland have left that concept. So it's up in the discussion in Southern Caucasus and in Central Asia and so on. So it's mentioned as something that comes up in wartime, and we know that these kind of countries are very essential. Austria have still this neutral status, and when Finland have chosen to be NATO member, they are not willing to organize a state leader conference now for the Helsinki, and they wish Austria to do it. And there we see this making countries to peace zones, and then neutrality or non-alignment is so important. So final word to Francis Dehaun Lee.
Thank you, Tor. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to also thank the organizers for preparing this consultation and giving me this opportunity. Because time is very short, I'd like to go directly to the 7 points that I would like to propose to be considered and hopefully included in the declaration for Helsinki 50 plus. As all the previous speakers have spoken, an old era has ended, a new era with a high level of warfare, technology and capital combined, and old values gone. And I think this perception of unfolding new things should be very clear in the declaration. Especially, it means new realities of militarization, new realities of warfare, new realities of international relations, and the end of the influence of values and norms that we were used to since 1960s and 70s. First, I think there is fundamental limitation of the modern human rights in controlling new system of war. I think that the modern human rights has omitted two aspects deliberately. One, how to control the military, and the second, how to control the monopoly of capital. And that's the limitation of modern human rights system. And to strengthen the role of human rights in controlling warfare and militarization, I think we should pay attention to the new third generation of human rights, one of which is human rights to peace. It comes from the conscientious objection to military service, which is based on the fundamental freedom of conscience. But this is limited because this is only freedom, human rights to military service, not to the whole system. So we have to redefine and supplement the freedom of every individual and sovereign rights of every individual to be able to refuse the state-sponsored killing, the militarization, including paying tax to the military and security sectors. So that's my number 1 point. In other words, security has to be redefined with the 21st century notion of human rights. We have to pay attention to the missing part of the modern human rights system. And we should go beyond the human security notion to security being controlled by fundamental human rights values. This also includes the parliamentarian and public control of the military and security sector, which is getting weak and weak because of the alliance structure, international alliance structure, and because of development of AI technology in the military, and because of the use of outer space and deep sea and new spaces for militarization. Today's parliament and the public and the media simply do not have enough access to these new areas of militarization. So we should include this consideration into fundamentally new human rights to peace and security. And second, we should develop some kind of public control on the alliance. The First World War started because of the alliance building. And that's what Europe contributed to the warfare. And finally tried to came out. But again, because of alliance building, the Second World War happened, expanding to East Asia and Pacific. So this alliance building is now increasing and expanding. Japan is deliberately trying to create NATO in East Asia. And South Korea is now in this turmoil of getting involved or rejecting or whatever. So this alliance building, we should have a clear view whether this is in accordance with modern constitution and international law, etc. For example, we can understand the outbreak of Ukraine war in Ukraine as NATO overtaking OSCE conflict prevention mechanisms. You had mechanisms based on Helsinki principles, but NATO overtook it. It destroyed it. So the second point, how do we control this expansion of military alliances? And number three, I think we should go back to the old wisdom of conflict prevention. As Eng Sai-kan mentioned, it starts from trust building and dialogue and diplomacy. And I'd like to add one thing. We are living in the era of expanding warfare and more frequent warfare and more deceptive warfare. Every war looks like local, but it's fundamentally global. Every country is involved, but they just deny the fact. So I'd like to add one more aspect. The civil society and democratic forces should be constantly sending out early warnings for potential outbreak war. The war in Ukraine was anticipated. People knew it was coming from 2018. The war and atrocity by Israeli ultra-right-wing government is anticipated. We knew it was coming. So preventive, along with early warning, concerted warning, should be highlighted. Number four, as you know, the military is number 4 contributor to climate gas, the carbon emission of carbon gas. And it's not counted, it's not monitored, etc. So this combination of expansion of military activities and production and the climate crisis and the failure of international governance to control this should be highlighted. Without controlling military, there is totally no control of climate crisis. And number 5, the militarization of artificial intelligence led by US and China, Russia, and South Korea, and Japan, Taiwan, most of the rich countries. This militarization of artificial intelligence is a way of no return. It's a doomsday scenario. In terms of consumption of energy and manpower and institution and breakdown of democracy, everything is there in the militarization artificial intelligence, but except superficial discussion in EU, there is absolutely no control or regulation or norms building on the militarization of artificial intelligence. And number 6, I'd like to emphasize that we should restore the international principle of neutrality, even though Nordic countries have betrayed that principles after the war in Ukraine. We should still try to restore this very important principle, which is almost the same thing as respect for sovereignty of each country, which is basis for cooperative international relations. Neutrality, you do not have right to engage in the war unless you are invaded. Neutrality is the basic form, and neutrality is the counter principle of military alliance building. And number 7 is again this democratic control. I think it should be a separate part because of development of artificial intelligence in the military and because of the warfare in space and deep sea, and because of the different deceptive structures of alliance building, especially in the Asia Pacific. I think the principle of democratic control of the military should be fundamentally renewed. It has been fooled by the development of military technologies. So I think we should rewrite and renew the principles of democratic control of security and military sectors. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. One more contribution to this discussion. Now we have 15 minutes left, and we will end sharp in 15 minutes. We will save the chat, and so I still recommend to contribute there. But now the floor is open to anyone. It's been a lot to digest, I know. And we will have more times. We will distribute the findings of these sessions and so on. But I'm quite for certain that there are connections. When Francis talked about this right to peace, I think that was a way to link the issues and to say that the human rights would maybe be the most important one above the security, the way we look at security, which I think is an interesting way to combine these normally separate issues. Palle?
Yes, thank you for all the interventions. It's been really interesting. But now I see we have very little time left in this webinar. You've come up with many suggestions for things that should be included in the declaration. But now I want to ask, how do we go from here and have this process? Tord, can you lay out how we can steer this process to include the new suggestions or discussion about it?
Well, what happens now is that we have an email address. We should put it into the chat, actually. Maybe you can find it, Mikael, where people can send their contributions. And we have collected the email addresses to people. So we will summarize all the issues and send out, hopefully several times, at least one time, or hopefully 2 times before the 7th of July. So people can think and digest it on themselves. Then our closest cooperation partners, which is the International Peace Bureau and World Wide on War, and the Nordic Peace Alliance, and Our House, the Belarusian Our House, we will look into the final, after the final date, the 7th of July, and as soon as possible, make a final declaration, which will then be signed on. We are very well aware of that it's not really possible to make a perfect or even good process because there is so short time. But our intention is not to make the final draft. Our intention is to give this to embassies and the official conference in Helsinki, but also as a part of the process. So this is not the end, and it's focused more on the principal issues rather than being a political platform for uniting all movements and addressing the immediate concerns like the war against Iran or so on, but to have principles as basis to find common ground, sort of. We do know that this is a hard thing, but it's I think that the contributions today is very helpful. And it is so that we are not only thinking about the declaration. We have this website where we will publish different contributions. And when we get such ones as today, we hope to publish also these specific contributions. Everything is not about the declaration. We have to have a sort of continuous discussion going on. This will, of course, not be easy. Today, the news in Sweden is that the government have totally defunded the Olof Palme Center, which is a surprise, while they at the same time have given more money to the Swedish Democratic Party, the xenophobian party, for their international affairs. And as all of you know, Olof Palme Center has been very, very instrumental and important in this whole common security discussions. So times are hard, that's for certain. But as Anno said, it's worse in other parts of the world. Although we see some suppression going on here as well in terms of people losing their jobs, and there are quite a lot of attacks on the Palestinian demonstrations, and the peace movement is really put under pressure. Blacklisting is going on here, although maybe not in the same scale as some other. But we are really in a situation where we need this coming together and defending ourselves together. Yuri, please take this floor.
Well, firstly, thank to all speakers for wonderful presentations and for organizers to this very timely event. I much support the proposal posted into chat by Michael to call for nuclear disarmament for common security of all humans in the declaration. And also there is very important issue. I posted into chat a link to EBCO, it is European Bureau for Conscientious Objection annual report on conscientious objection in Europe. Many countries are considering conscription, and there are concrete steps in this direction, legislative, policy making, and so on. And since we observe today preparations for war, Europeans, like we Ukrainians, could find themselves with closed borders and buses of military recruiters running on the streets and catching young people and transporting them to military units and torturing those who are refusing to be soldiers into being soldiers. And of course, all of this also coinciding with deadly attacks, like current deadly attack when Russian rocket destroyed a housing, a big 9 stories house, completely destroyed into rubbles, and many people died. It is deadly attack. We need to recognize that we need to write in the declaration that we recognize vital role of human right to conscientious objection to military service as a fundamental pillar of common security and necessary democratic restraint on sovereign power of governments to conscript people for mass killing in their militant geopolitical competition. We need to emphasize that when every citizen will refuse to kill, all wars will be ceased and would be impossible to happen again. And that would be the best for common security of the humankind on common planet. And we indeed not only need to write it in the declaration, but we need to mobilize worldwide, present everywhere, in every country, in every corner of the world, popular movement of nonviolent resistance to all war making, for restraint on powers of the military to wage wars, for dialogue, for real democracy, because democracy is a governance based on peaceful dialogue, on talking, not killing, not beating people into submission, but talking with people and finding peaceful solutions. I hope we could write to the declaration that we need to get rid of nukes and ensure that everyone have a right to refuse to kill.
Thank you, Yuri. And I think this is seldom focused when we talk about how to create peace. That the most important thing is all these consciousness objectors and deserters, those who don't want to fight. And that's why it's really an important issue in terms of, because today they are not accepted into the EU, many of them, and even threatened by deportation back. So this is really where civil society have to act clearly. Is there any other comments until your dictator will see to that we end in time? You can see now in the chat that there is this link to info Helsinki+50.org to the small details necessary to create peace. I can give you odd information. The reason why we use letters plus in the web address and here in the here is that you cannot have the plus sign in a web address. So there's a lot of small practical details on the way to peace, and we have to continue doing all these small things while maintaining the big picture. And we were, of course, very anxious about doing a special session on Asia. It is often seen as, this has only with Europe to do, why bring in Asia? But I think this webinar have shown how useful that is. It gives another perspective, both on how one can look about what happens in Europe, but also that the Helsinki principles are of relevance to other parts of the world. So I thank you very much for all the speakers and for all people attending. There is a way to save the chat, and that if you move your cursor up on top in the menu, there are 3 dots. And if you activate that, you will find Save Chat. This is very useful in many, when doing these Zoom meetings. And of course, we know that in the end, we have to meet in person. We will hope that some of you will be able to come to Helsinki, but we also know that movements that meet in persons, like Via Campesina, like Friends of the Earth, like the International Peace Bureau, that is so necessary. And then a Zoom meeting can add to that. But we can never replace the working together directly, where we can see each other and understand that we have to try to do what we can and finding ways to decide here and now what to do. And then we can, of course, have endless discussions, but there is also time for act. And this I see very much as an act. We together were able to contribute to this process, and hope that some of you are able to attend the other sessions. Next one starts in 2.5 hours, and then the final session for Latin America and North America 2 hours after that. So thank you very much, everyone. It was so nice to see you, and
Thank you.
come together.